Welcome to the Tough Talk Podcast, your weekly sports podcast rambling and debating all your favorite sports. Previews, recaps, predictions, and more. Only here at Tough Talk. Be sure to follow along on Twitter at Tough Talk Pod. Now, here are your hosts, Christian and Derrick.
Hey Christian, how's it going today?
Hey, how you doing? Well, it's another day of tough talk, another great week of sports, and it's ready to get down and get dirty with it. It's going to be a good week of breaking it down, all the sports that we had discussed. A lot of great things to talk about.
Absolutely. Let's go ahead and just get into the NBA East real quick first. And the first thing I gotta say is the top four teams are looking really good right now. You also got like Philadelphia just outside the top four that's looking really good. The Bucks, Giannis Antetokounmpo looks like he's gonna have an MVP season this year. The way he's looking, he's just on another level. There's only a couple other people, but we'll get to that later. The Celtics look really good. Kemba Walker looks to be the addition that they needed when they thought it was going to be Kyrie Irving. He looks to be a good ball facilitator. He looks to be really good at that role. The Heat, I really didn't know what to expect with Jimmy Butler because he's been on quite a couple teams in the past few years. I didn't know what to expect. Especially with the stuff that happened in Minnesota, me being a huge Minnesota fan, I thought he was just toxic. And honestly, I mean, maybe he was just toxic to the Timberwolves, because if you look at the Timberwolves right now, they're doing pretty good, and so are the Heat. So maybe it was just the wrong team, wrong situation for him. The Raptors, Pascal Siakam, he looks just like he's ready to be the leading scorer for that team, just like he looked like last year, and I think that's why they were okay with moving on from Kawhi Leonard. The other thing I want to talk about real quick is Bradley Beal is second in the league in scoring right now at 30 points per game, and they only have 4 wins over there in Washington. It makes you really wonder what's going on there in Washington and what they need to do to get some more help around him. What do you think about that?
I actually think that it's not much to do with Washington. I mean, that team definitely needs to improve a little bit, but I think this Eastern Conference is a lot tougher than we gave it credit for at the beginning of the season. When you look at these teams, you already got 4 teams with 10 wins so far this season, as we just discussed, from Milwaukee, Boston, Miami, and Toronto. But you have teams like Detroit and Atlanta and Washington all sitting at 4 wins, sitting at the bottom. And all those teams can compete. They all look pretty good so far this season. Even the Knicks at certain times, I will say, look pretty good. And so I would say all around this Eastern Conference has gelled to be a little more competitive than we gave them credit for. I'm really enjoying Miami. We've been discussing Miami a few weeks now, and I think you hit the nail right in the head with Jimmy Butler. I think that he might have just had a bad situation with Thibodeau and Minnesota over there. But I think finally he's found a good spot. I think that he fits the culture very well. I think when you watch that post-game conference and they were talking about like, he was like, no, this conference is for me. This press conference is for me. Like discussing with his teammates, just joking around. Some people said that was selfish, but that wasn't at all. That was that locker room chemistry that those players have with each other, and that's good. That's good to have between those players, and you can see it. And they have a nice spread between young and older players, mostly on the younger side for Miami, which is good for the future for that team. Them sitting at 10-3 is a great spot for them, and look for them to have a great weekend and a great week of basketball. They're going to continue to be in the top 4 for a while. I'm really enjoying what Miami looks like. And for for Washington, Bradley Beal, my God, he's been insane. That game he had against San Antonio on Wednesday night, absolutely incredible. I don't think he missed in the third quarter. And Rui Hachimura just continues to impress me. I'm really enjoying Washington. I don't know if they'll be a playoff team this year just because, like I said, the East is more competitive, but they're on their way.
So we talked about this in Twitter messages the other night of why did Miami move on from Hassan Whiteside? And I was telling you that I thought when watching Portland play, Hassan Whiteside was a major issue defensively because he likes to camp the lane and he was making everybody else, like if there was a pick and roll, he wasn't coming forward for the pick and roll. And I think that's why Miami moved on to Bam Adebayo, because he's a younger, more potential, and he's able to go out and cover the pick and roll and come back and be able to, switch if need switch. And I think that's what they realized, and they were paying Hassan Whiteside way too much money. Hassan was a late bloomer anyway. A lot of people are like, well, how could you get rid of him? He's older. He was a late bloomer. That's why they got rid of him. Bam Adebayo looks ready to be the star of that team. that team looks really good, really young, and honestly, without Jimmy Butler, they were a really good team, and with Jimmy Butler, they look just as good. That was the big question I talked about last week, was how is he going to look coming off of the injuries, but he looks like he just fits right in. And that's definitely a first for him. If we're being completely honest, he's never really just fit right in with the team. We thought he'd fit right in with Philadelphia. Didn't work.
Yeah, that's true. I'm just excited that we're actually talking about NBA regular season 15 games into the season and having a lot of content to talk about. I keep saying it over and over again. I've been discussing it for weeks now, how incredible and how amazing it is that the NBA regular season is relevant. And I'm going to continue to say it until it's no longer relevant. And I don't think that's going to change, because we're going to see players come back from injury. We're seeing really competitive games. We're seeing teams that we would thought would be at the top of the rankings for the last 5-6 years sitting at the bottom. It's so interesting now that, we're seeing a transition in certain teams, and it's competitive and it's fun. And it's a great sport to watch right now. The regular season is relevant. It's so interesting right now.
Absolutely. And the reason it's so relevant right now is because our biggest dynasty is down with injuries right now. Next year, that team's going to be disgusting to watch, and I'm pretty sure they're going to go right back to being where they were at the top of the league. But this year, it's a really fun, competitive league this year. And one of the teams I think is the most competitive and most fun to watch, I'm going to go ahead and get into it real quick, and we're going to go into the NBA at West. They're not one of the top teams, but one of the fun teams to watch right now is the Phoenix Suns. They're a lot of fun. Ricky Rubio looks like he fits in perfectly with that Phoenix team. I didn't know how that would work because Devin Booker was kind of a ball-heavy guard last year. But then after looking, he just needs somebody to facilitate the ball to him. He didn't have that last year. He didn't have that player. They're not even in the top 7 right now. But I'm going to go ahead and tell you the top 7 teams are only separated by 4 games. That's 12 wins for the Lakers and 8 wins for the 7 seed. That's an impressive start to the NBA West, and the NBA West is super competitive this year. The Lakers, like I said, they already look good. What do you want to say about it? It looks like a super team, and it looks like they're doing it well. And, I can just knock on the same old horse again and say if injuries happen, that's going to be the downfall of the team. But that's the case with most teams in the NBA or any sport anymore. Nuggets,
when they start getting... Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, that's all right. Go ahead.
I was going to say, when they start getting ahead... Right now, they only have a 2-point lead against the second seed, but they're gonna make some distance. The Lakers team are. They really need to start considering load management. As unfortunate as I feel about that, with AD and with LeBron, they really need to consider it if they want to make some noise in the in the playoffs, because those, just like you said, injuries are paramount with that. And you're right about Phoenix, and they don't even have one of their best players right now regarding the suspension. So once he's
still out for 25 games.
Exactly. So when he comes back, and so you say that Phoenix is your most impressive. I think it's the fifth best team in the West right now is most impressive, and I think it's the Dallas Mavericks. I'm loving what Luka's doing. I think he's my MVP player this year. I think he's only continuing to shine. He's becoming one of my favorite players to watch in the league. He's my favorite player to watch so far, for sure. He's just becoming more and more progressive. Now, I understand why he won Rookie of the Year last year over Trae Young. I was a little hesitant to wonder why that happened last season, but now I know for sure. And that Dallas team is just amazing. And I think they're going to continue. I think Porzingis is going to knock out some rust, and they're going to make some noise. I think they're going to sit in the top 8 for the whole season.
So the other 3 teams I want to talk about real quick is the Rockets and the Clippers. The Rockets, like I said, they still haven't blown up. You don't think it's going to happen. I think it will. I'm guessing right around the All-Star break, if they're not a winning team, that team's going to get blown up for sure. The Clippers are who we thought they were. Load management seems to be a thing with this team, but it doesn't seem to be a concern. I think they could take their top stars and keep doing load management, because Lou Williams is 6th man of the year. He already has the 6th man of the year, in my opinion, if you've been watching that team, because he's been so good for that team. But the Dallas Mavericks aren't a bad team to watch. The other 2 teams that are really interesting, we talked about the Utah Jazz being a top 4 team right now. The Utah Jazz are the 7th seed or the 6th seed right now, with the Minnesota Timberwolves being the 7th seed. And those 2 just split games this week. Wednesday it was the Jazz, but Monday it was the Timberwolves. So it really just kind of depends. And then the other thing I want to talk about real quick is the Denver Nuggets. this may be the team with the most depth in the NBA right now. They got guys coming off their bench averaging 20 fantasy points per game because they're catching double-doubles. So, I mean, they got Jeremy Grant coming off their bench right now behind Paul Millsap. He looks amazing. They got Mason Plumlee behind Jokic. He looks amazing. This team is so deep. I think that is the team that's going to be the scariest all year, and they could end up being the number 1 seed in the West because of that depth, because they can do proper load management. And it kind of made me chuckle because they were up by like 30 points the other night, and the announcer said, if you guys want to do load management, that's how you do it right there. And I was like, well, I guess he's right. You know, you blow a team out, you get to sit on the bench.
Yeah, that's true. And I think we're just not talking a lot about Denver because Jokic is amazing, but he's not that marquee or hype player that is nice to talk about in the media. I think this team is very underrated. It's not talked about enough. I mean, they're 10-3. They're second in the West, and they're only going to continue to shine. I don't know if they'll reach the Lakers. It all depends on what happens. Obviously, injuries is what we keep discussing. But Denver was one of my teams I talked about at the beginning of the season. I think they're going to be a really good team. I think they're going to continue to shine. And you said it perfectly. I mean, you're getting bench players with double-doubles. You're not seeing that anywhere else, at least not in the amount that we're getting from the Nuggets.
I will say the biggest disappointment from this team so far is Michael Porter Jr. I watched the other night. He had 3 fouls in less than 2 minutes on the court, and he's still not even, I don't think he's hit 10 points this season. That's really disappointing from somebody who had comparisons to Kevin Durant before his injury. I'm hoping maybe the game's just not coming to him and he just needs it to slow down because it's so fast-paced for him right now. Because that's what they talk about in the NBA and the NFL and any sport. It's like the game just needs to slow down because they're just thinking about it too much and it's going too fast for him. And I think that's what's going to happen, at least that's what I'm hoping. And I think he needs more minutes, to be honest, too, because he seems like somebody who's a ball-dominant forward, and he needs the more minutes. But he's kind of been a disappointment for the Nuggets so far, but I think he'll come around. And I think that if that's their least concern, then they're doing okay right now, because that was kind of a steal of a pick last year for him.
Yep.
All right, so you want to get into the MVP talks? Since you already talked about Luka,
yeah,
let's go ahead and talk about Luka.
Yeah, he's definitely he's definitely number 1 in my opinion. I think Luka's amazing. I think he's going to continue to shine all season. He's my number 1 right now. He's doing things that we saw with LeBron as a young player. He's only continuing to shine. I think that you continue to build pieces around this guy. Dallas is going to be a team for the future that's going to continue to be in the top of the West. And as I keep saying, I think Porzingis just needs to keep knocking off that rust because he's not full to his 100% potential yet to where he needs to be. But I really like this Dallas team, and I like Luka leading the charge. He's my number 1 MVP.
So I'll go ahead and tell you who my number 1 is real quick. And then Luka is my number 2, but number 1 is Giannis. Giannis is leading the league in rebounding right now, and he's like 3rd or 4th on scoring. And then last night he had 15 assists, I think is what I saw Bleacher Report tell me. Now, if that guy's getting 15 assists in the game, and he's already averaging 15 rebounds, that guy's going to get the MVP. I think he's going to quietly average a triple-double and not get many triple-doubles this year. While the other people like James Harden and LeBron or Luka are going to average triple-doubles because they're getting a bunch of them, I think this is the guy who's going to like almost average it and not even hit but like maybe 5 of them all year. He's just that kind of player who can just physically take over a game, offensively, defensively, and now he can pass the ball too, so that's a great thing to see. The other guy I got is James Harden. I was talking about him because he's leading the league in scoring yet again this year. I didn't know if that would happen. Yeah, by a lot. I didn't know if that would happen with Russell Westbrook on the team or not, but it is. And it's actually impressive to see. The real question and concern going forward, though, is if them and LeBron have the same issue of sharing the ball too much and getting yourself out of the NBA or the MVP considerations. I know that sounds weird to say share the ball too much, but let's be real here. It's harder to average a triple-double if your teammate's averaging a double-double than if you're on a really bad team. Like you said, right now, Luka is averaging all these triple-doubles because Kristaps is rusty. If Kristaps isn't rusty, his numbers may dip, and may dip dramatically. But the thing about it is, it's kind of just like, I think Luka and Giannis are the two front runners, and it's because they're controlling their teams, and it's all about which one wants to help the team out more, and it's which one gets more help from his team sooner. Because the Bucks need Giannis, and the Dallas Mavericks need Luka right now, and it's the teams that don't need their star player that never gets MVPs. If you just go back and look at it traditionally, it's always the guy who had to carry the team that usually gets MVPs.
I like the honest. I like the Luka talk, but I mean, and like I said, Luka's my number one. But I would put Harden at two, and because of the fact that he's just absolutely dominating with the points, he's averaging 8 points more than second place, who is Bradley Beal, by the way, and which is incredible for a 4-win team being second in the league. But Harden has been incredible. With Harden and Westbrook, both of those guys together, they're averaging 60 points per game, just those two together. And they both are sitting around 7 assists per game, both sitting around 7 rebounds per game. Yeah, they're not triple double numbers yet, but having both those stars on the team and they're remotely close is really impressive. So I like Harden for number two right now. He has more 40-point games than anybody else in the league by a few games. And that's why I have him at number two. But Giannis is right behind it for sure. It's a really close 2-3 for me. But I think Luka's leading the charge, in my opinion. And that might be a little biased just because, the stats don't line up, but just the impressive play by this guy and how young he is and how he just continues to just make noise. That's why I like Luka.
Absolutely. All right, let's get on to the Rookie of the Years. And I've got some in here that I didn't have last week. Talked about Rui Hachimura, how much I love him.
Mm-hmm.
His numbers are dipping, but he's still producing. Ja Morant, we talked about him last week as an obvious candidate. Kendrick Nunn, another obvious candidate. But the guy who's really starting to make noise and starting to come alive really right now is RJ Barrett. He's doing really good. He's, I believe, 4th in scoring right now and 3rd in assists by rookies. I could be wrong on that. Don't quote me for sure, but I'm pretty sure that's the exact numbers. And if that's the case, RJ Barrett's showing why he was that high pick and why he was considered for the number 1 overall pick until Zion went absolutely insane at Duke. The question here now is going to be, if Zion never plays another minute in the NBA, say the injury is bad, okay? Say he averages 15 minutes in this first game and then he's just out for the rest of the career. Then it becomes, why did nobody take RJ Barrett number 1? RJ Barrett was the clear number 1 pick. Why didn't they take him? Ja Morant was a clear number 1 pick. And it comes back to this thing, and it's like just back when Greg Oden got hurt. You don't know they're going to get hurt. You're going for that once-in-a-generation talent, and then something happened. Greg Oden was the most dominant center in all of college basketball when they drafted him, and then he got hurt. Zion Williamson was the most dominant player in all of NCAA last year, and then he got hurt. So the thing about when people try to say, well, why didn't they take so-and-so? Why didn't they take so-and-so? Well, maybe if you were around then you would have understood it was an injury. Sorry, that frustrates me because I see all these things about why would people take Greg Oden over Kevin Durant? It's because Greg Oden looked like he was the next Shaquille O'Neal at that point, and then he got hurt.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, if you look at Greg Oden for Ohio State, he was incredible, and he outplayed Kevin Durant in college in some aspects. So when you look at that draft and you don't know the future, which you obviously don't, but you're sitting in that draft at that point, Greg Oden was a clear favorite over Kevin Durant. There's no doubt about it when you go back to that draft. And
it's the same like this year with Zion and RJ,
Even with the hype, even though there was a lot of hype between Zion, but there was a reason behind it. He took that Duke team, and both those guys were amazing, by the way, with RJ and Zion, but that true freshman came in and was absolutely amazing. So I don't blame New Orleans for taking Zion 100%, but look, he's young. He still has a lot of time to grow. Even if he has to sit out this entire season, he'll still come back next year, and I don't even think he'll be 20 years old yet. So we'll have plenty of time for Zion. I think he'll be okay. I think we'll continue to see some good play from him. But my favorite Rookie of the Year, though, real quick, is Ja Morant and Rui Hachimura still. I like RJ Barrett's play, but I think those two have really stepped up. And I'm going to have to give it to Rui Hachimura just because we've been talking about RJ Barrett. We've been talking about Ja Morant, these 1-2s 3 overall picks, but Rui was such a steal in this draft. And although they're only a 4-win team, how amazing these guys are playing, with Beal playing for Washington and then Rui really stepping up. He's great on the floor. He's so energetic too. He looks like he just wants to keep learning and keep playing. And I think that he's going to have a big ceiling for potential for his career. I like Rui Hachimura for Rookie of the Year so far.
I'll tell you what, Rui Hachimura is one of those guys, when we discussed him in the NBA draft, and when he got taken 9th overall, a lot of the scouts, a lot of the people were saying he was taken too high, that he wasn't even a lottery pick. But when me and you discussed it, I told you if he wasn't taken in the lottery, he was going to be a steal for whatever team got him. And then he got taken at number 9.
I thought he was going to go lower.
Yeah,
I thought he was going to be higher. I kept having him in my mocks to Indiana at I think it was 16, 17, because he was an older player, and I was like, that would fit Indiana's scheme very well, and I think that would work. And then they took him, Washington took him. I was happy with the pick. I thought it fit, because who they thought Washington was going to take was Doumbia, and it's working out better for them, obviously, than having Sema Doumbia for the Washington Wizards.
And that's what I wanted to point that out, because it just seemed like during the draft time, everybody was just like, oh, he was taken way too high. He was taken way too high. Where are the players that were taken after him doing right now? What are they doing?
Tyler Herro's doing pretty good.
Hero's doing good, but he's still not averaging the same numbers or minutes that Rui Hachimura has been able to lead to his team. So that's why I was like, that's a great pick for them.
For Washington in that aspect too. You needed that forward play for Rui Hachimura.
Especially after just getting rid of Otto Porter and Kelly Oubre, they were really just looking to increase that small forward position. And the funniest part to me is they never even told Rui Hachimura he was going to get drafted. They just drafted him. He was surprised as everybody else on draft night. He said he did not get a call from Washington, but Washington put a star next to his name after the workouts and said that's the guy we're taking. So I thought that was awesome. I thought that was kind of funny. I thought that was kind of just how it worked. He said he was just as surprised as everybody else, and I thought that's pretty cool. So let's get into NBA DraftKings. And first guy I want to talk about is Marquise Chris for the Warriors. The guy's averaging really good numbers right now, fantasy-wise, and he's only 4,700. If you can pick him up, because he's going to be a good steal for right now. Jeremy Grant, we were just talking about this earlier, that the Denver Nuggets got guys coming off their bench, averaging double-doubles, averaging 20 fantasy points per game. I think he's a great steal at 4,200. Daniel Tice for the Celtics, 4,900, another great guy. These are all big men, by the way, except Bojan Bogdanovic. He's 6,200, but I'm telling you he's worth it, because I watched the game Monday night, and he could not miss from 3. It was a fun game to watch, and at 6,200, he's a steal. Willie Cauley-Stein, another guy, 5,000. These are the guys that if you get a couple of these guys on your roster, you're going to be able to get 2 or 3 big name players. Now, I don't think I have to go through the big name players, but if you name me 2, I'll just tell you, like James Harden, obviously one of the best players right now in the NBA for fantasy points. Luka, Giannis, pretty much MVP candidates are going to be doing good for you right now. Karl Anthony Towns, he's not playing tonight, but he's another good one that's averaging a lot of points. He had an off game against the Jazz Wednesday night, but I think he'll be doing good. Like I said, if I got to tell you about the big fantasy, if the big salary people, I probably shouldn't even be telling you about it, and you need to go play some free things first and figure it out, because you got to get the big guys in there. Like, I know that Christian over here, he doesn't do that much of the fantasy for the basketball, but even he would know to take Willie Cauley-Stein or Luka Doncic. So, what do you think?
I just got 2 guys that I really want to discuss, because you hit a lot of them on the head that are really good value picks. And mine aren't necessarily value picks, but they're just good picks based on who they're playing. And they're basically for more of the games tomorrow night, Saturday. I really like Terry Rozier against the Chicago Bulls tomorrow night for the Charlotte Hornets. I think that he really has an opportunity to excel. Chicago's been... I think they've got lucky with their 4 wins so far this season, 5 wins this season. So I think that I think Charlotte is a better team than they're putting on the floor and what their record is showing. So I think Terry Rozier, he's really surprised me so far. And I think you should throw him in the mix for sure. And then second, I'm gonna say it, and I know we've already talked about this guy a little more, but Ja Morant. They're playing the Lakers on Saturday night, but they played the Lakers already once before, and Ja Morant went off. That entire team played really well. They did lose the game, but Ja Morant had a great great game when they played at the beginning of the season. I think he was like 28, 29 fantasy points. And because they're playing the Lakers, his salary will be a little lower. So if you're playing late night Saturday night, John Morant's a good pickup.
All right, two other people I want to talk about real quick because you reminded me of one, honestly. You were talking about how the Bulls are playing, and Kobe White is a cheap point guard, and he's not bad. He's been putting up pretty good fantasy points. And I think that would be somebody that's a really good steal. And then the other one, I just completely lost. Give me just a second.
Kobe White has been the only bright side of the Chicago Bulls, in my opinion, so far. That was a good pickup for them. We were curious what was going to happen in that draft. Remember when we were discussing in the live NBA draft party if they were going to pick Garland or him, or, obviously Garland went early, but what was going to happen. And then when they picked Kobe White, I remember you were a little nervous saying that, his speed was good, but who knows if he'll be a bust. He hasn't determined that.
He almost plays like a Euro player because he plays it slow. He takes his time. He's methodical with his movements.
Yeah, and he's fast, though. Even though he plays it slow, he's got speed.
Yeah, that was my big concern about him. The other guy, and it hit me in the back of my head really quickly, was a guy we never talked about on draft night, but now he's out there and he's a starter, is Kai Bowman for the Golden State Warriors. They were starting Draymond Green at point guard when D'Lo went out, but he's been hurting too. So they've been starting Kai Bowman, and he's kind of been wishy-washy, but at the same time, he's a below average salary point guard, and he may be worth looking at as well. That was the other guy. I couldn't remember, but for some reason, as soon as you said rookies, it hit my head again.
Awesome.
Anybody else you want to talk about real quick?
No, I just enjoy some DraftKings. And like you said, if you are a little confused on it, hop in those free games and play those free games.
Absolutely.
Because that helps you out a lot. And then when the games are over, look at the first who places first against you and compare and start working some strategies, because that helps out a lot when you're comparing and who plays. Trends are life when it comes to DraftKings and FanDuel. Remember that.
And if you ever have questions, just use hashtag Tough Talk at Tough Talk, and we'll tell you what we think personally. Yeah, because I know we're on there all the time.
I mean, you just posted a pretty cool video yesterday, which was pretty neat. I know a lot of people liked it about NFL pickups for the Thursday night football game. We'll be talking more DraftKings, and that worked out. We're going to do some more of that, right?
Yeah, well, Jonathan Williams, I'll just go and discuss it really quickly. I got on there yesterday. I said, hey, if you got a chance to pick up Jonathan Williams, pick him up. He's really cheap on DraftKings right now, and he's on most waiver wires. And then the guy went out there and he had a 100-yard game and a touchdown. So 19 fantasy points for your ESPN leagues is pretty darn good for a waiver wire pickup last second. So I'm going to be trying to do a couple more of those from now on, but that was one I wanted to do for Thursday since we do our shows on Fridays. But with that being said, let's go ahead and get over to On the Ice, and we're going to let Christian discuss the NHL.
Absolutely. So what a crazy week for the NHL. And really what started off was a surprise firing. At least in my opinion, it was a surprise. Some people saw it coming. I did not. And that was the Toronto Maple Leafs firing Mike Babcock for the head coaching position for the Toronto Maple Leafs. Toronto hasn't started off too hot, although they are fourth in the Atlantic Division. They're still sitting in the wild card. It's just not what they were hoping for expectations-wise. They're sitting at 24 points, which is about 7 points out of the lead for the Atlantic of the Boston Bruins. And it just didn't really work out. It didn't really pan out for them. They didn't like it, which was Mike Babcock was such a big signing a few years back for Toronto. A lot of teams were battling for him to be signed. So I'm sure that Babcock will find another team pretty well or at some point. But definitely a big surprise. Toronto did win with their first with their interim coach last night. They did get their first win with him behind the bench for them, so that helped out. But yeah, as I said, Toronto sitting at the number 4 seed in the Atlantic, which puts them in the wild card race. Still 24 points. Still a lot of time left in the season. We're only about a third, maybe even you could say a quarter away through the NHL season, in between that area. So a lot of hockey to play. Wasn't too late to make a change in your head coaching position, but definitely interesting to say the least. Did not see that happening from Toronto. A lot of controversy, I think, that we'll see continue. But hockey is big in Canada, especially Toronto. So we'll see what happens moving forward. Then real quick, we'll just round out our standings. And the Washington Capitals still lead the way in the Eastern Conference, 36 points. Outstanding play by Washington. They continue to look great. They had a great game the other night against the Rangers, although they wound up with the L, but that's fine. 16-4-4, 36 points, insane. And right behind them, though, is the New York Islanders at 33 and the Boston Bruins at 33. So this Eastern Conference is getting a little more exciting as we get farther through the season. On the Western Conference side, still the St. Louis Blues. So our Western versus Eastern Conference Stanley Cup, obviously, but the Stanley Cup champions of the last 2 years still sitting at the first seeds in each side. So we might still be lucky to see that Stanley Cup final if that happened. Both of them look really good. Edmonton Oilers sitting right behind them, though, with 31 points. And Vegas Golden Knights look really good, too, at 26. And so does Colorado look with 28. So we're seeing a lot of good teams starting to really solidify themselves. We're starting to see some battles for the first seeds. Some teams are starting to fall off, like New Jersey Devils are not looking well at all. We saw actually their top goalie from a few years back, Schneider, actually be put on waivers and moved to the AHL, which was like, wow, all have the mighty have fallen. After seeing he was the big replacement for Marty Brodeur when he moved on to retire and moved on to the St. Louis Blues at one point and then retired. So a lot of teams are making some rebuilds. Unfortunately, the Jersey Devils just not looking good, but we're seeing some great play by other teams. All right, there it is.
All right, well, I got to say that'd be pretty interesting. Let's go and get into the AFC playoffs. Still the Pats and the Bills. Still the Houston and the Colts.
Yep.
Still the Chiefs and the Raiders. And still the Ravens and Steelers. I guess the Steelers?
Well, I say they're in the hunt. Yeah, they're still in the hunt, but I think they have a long ways to go. You could even consider the Browns still in the hunt.
Yeah, but so you heard the doubt in my voice there because both of those teams are just kind of, Mm-hmm. But Houston and Indianapolis had a really good game last night. It was a good defensive struggle. Houston came out on top, so now they're leading the AFC, or the AFC East. AFC South. Goodness, why did I say East? The Pats are leading the East. Bills clearly the 5 seed right now, with a chance to still take over from the Patriots if the Patriots mess up one of these games here coming up real soon. The Patriots could actually try to be a wild card team this year, which is one of those things that Bill Belichick's probably having a heart attack right now thinking about. The Raiders, right now we're the 6th seed, but we could easily be the 4 seed with how tough the Chiefs' schedule is and how easy ours is here down the stretch. I understand that they got the Broncos and the Chargers coming up, but let's be honest, the Chargers can kind of just sneak up on you sometimes, and Phillip Rivers can throw for 4 touchdowns, 350 yards, no interceptions, and then the very next game throw 200 yards, 1 touchdown, and 3 interceptions. So you don't know which Phillip Rivers you're going to get, but that's going to be an interesting game. The Broncos have moved on from Joe Flacco as their starting quarterback and have looked a lot better since. So that's another dangerous game. The Chiefs have a really dangerous schedule going forward, and they also got to face us coming off the bye at the very first day of December. So I want to see that game, and I want to see the Raiders come out with some passion against that Chiefs defense or that Chiefs team because we need to beat them. As far as the Ravens go, I think that's the best team in the AFC right now, and maybe all of all of football because of how good that Lamar Jackson is playing right now. He looks like a cheat code on Madden sometimes when he's in the pocket. Yeah. Like he just makes people miss and then he just runs off for 30 yards. It doesn't make sense to me, but it's awesome to watch. Anything you got to add on that real quick?
Well, as crazy as some of these teams have had for losing records, the only team that is officially eliminated from all playoff contention is the Cincinnati Bengals at 0-10. Technically, the Washington Redskins, Miami Dolphins could still make the playoffs, which I don't see happening, but there is still the magic will happen. They're not officially eliminated yet. As if the playoffs would start right now, we would have in the wild card weekend, we'd have the Oakland Raiders traveling to Houston to take on the Texans, and we'd have the Buffalo Bills take on the Kansas City Chiefs. Right, if that would happen right now, Indianapolis Colts, Pittsburgh Steelers, Tennessee Titans would just be sitting outside in the hunt for. That would be the last 3 teams out for the AFC. On the NFC side, wild card weekend would look really impressive, and this is probably going to be where it sits. We might see some team switch. If anything, it'd be Dallas and Philadelphia. I think that's really the only game or only teams that might switch out here, but these wildcard teams are really running away with it. So we see the Minnesota Vikings versus the New Orleans Saints, first week wildcard weekend. Could you imagine that game? That'd be insane. 8-3 versus 8-2 on wildcard weekend as of right now.
absolutely incredible. And then we would see the Seattle Seahawks take on the Dallas Cowboys. It'd be some really incredible games if we continue on. The Rams, Eagles, and Panthers would just be the last three out for the NFC. I really like where the playoffs are sitting right now. I think that there's been some exciting teams, some surprising teams on both sides of the conferences, and I'm excited for what happens. But yeah, I agree with you. Baltimore is the most impressive team right now on both sides of the football for AFC, NFC, and I think that they have a big chance of moving far. We were talking about this earlier. I think if we could find a way to see Kansas City and Baltimore play each other with a healthy Mahomes and healthy Lamar Jackson, what a playoff game that would be.
All right, real quick, you're having some, it almost sounds like your microphone is underwater. Can you unplug it and plug it back in?
Sure.
All right, go ahead and say something real quick.
Check.
Yeah, it's still sounding like it's underwater, but we'll go ahead and just finish out with it. I don't understand why either. Let's go ahead and move over to the NFC side of things, though. And I talked about San Francisco losing that game to Seattle. I think they're going to lose again this week, too, but we'll talk about that here in a little bit. They're leading their division right now. You got the Packers and the Vikings fighting for the North. Both teams, amazing this year. The defense in Green Bay is not quite what I was thinking it would be. It's quite better than what I thought it was going to be. They still don't have a secondary, though. But, I mean, they're starting to get better. The Saints, another good team. I think the Panthers are slowly knocking themselves out of playoff contention right now. Losing games they shouldn't be losing. The Cowboys are still the Cowboys. And the Eagles, another team that looks like they're trying to knock themselves out of the playoffs. Now, that's going to leave teams like Seattle and LA and teams that are trying to fight for their division right now, the Vikings or the Packers, whichever one loses that. These teams like the Panthers and the Eagles are literally shooting themselves in the foot right now and looks like they could possibly miss playoffs if they don't get their stuff together. One of the teams that's surprising right now, no, they're not making the playoffs, but they are going to be some playoff upsetters, is the Atlanta Falcons right now. They're 55-12 in their last two games. That's the score. 55-12 in their last two games. They're fighting for their head coach right now, and it's very evident. This is a team that if your favorite team is facing them, be worried and go into it. Don't think you're going to blow them out like they've been getting blown out early in the season. That team's... I took their defense in fantasy this week just because of how good they've been playing the last 2 weeks.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'll
so what do you
say
think?
What though, and Atlanta wasn't playing against some bum teams either. They played against the Saints and they played against the Panthers, both playoff contention teams, and they put those numbers up. Yeah, they're most definitely fighting for their coach. They're fighting for Quinn, and I think that just with this momentum moving forward, I think they might have gave some security to him. He made the Super Bowl with that team. Unfortunately, they had the terrible loss with the comeback. But if I would give him another shot, this is almost like a Marvin Lewis case with Cincinnati. I think you could give him one more shot before moving on, because that NFC South is really tough, and they're going to have to find some ways to compete next year. And if they have a new head coach, they're probably going to have to blow it up. So you have to make the decision at this offseason whether they're going to decide to blow it up or take one more shot at it. If you're going to take one more shot at it, you need to keep Quinn on the coaching staff, in my opinion. I really like this Minnesota team. I know we've talked about it a lot. NFC is so interesting. You could either be the second seed with home field advantage, or you could be the fifth seed with an away playoff game on Wild Card Weekend with just one different loss right now. It's insane. One game. So all these games for the next 6 weeks in the NFC are so important for these teams that are battling for a playoff spot.
We only got about 2 seconds left on NFC players. So I got a hot take for you, something I've been thinking about.
Right.
I want you to think about this, and I don't want you can give your answer right now, but I want you to think about this for a week, and then we're going to talk about it again next week. What if the Saints re-sign the rights to Teddy Bridgewater and trade Teddy Bridgewater to the Bears for Mitchell Trubisky? That gives Drew Brees one more year at the helm, gives Matt Nagy a quarterback that's a little bit more mature and may be able to learn his crazy, vast offense that he has running in Chicago right now, because he said that Mitchell Trubisky still hasn't learned the entire playbook. That kind of raises concerns about, one, how big is your fucking playbook, and two, is Mitchell Trubisky taking forever to learn plays? So that's the two questions that really raises. But the reason I'm
not going to answer it. I'm going to hold on to it. I'm not going to answer it, but that's interesting. I'm going to actually put some thought into it, and I'm going to come back with you with some kind of argument next week.
Absolutely. Well, the other reason is because I believe Sean Payton is the best offensive coach we've seen in the NFL in the past 20 years. If you don't believe me, go look at Drew Brees' numbers. If anybody out there in the comments wants to go, well, there's no way. Look at the numbers. Just look at the numbers.
Yeah, I wouldn't argue that. Wouldn't argue that at all.
So if you give, and that's why I'm thinking Mitch Trubisky, good arm, complicated offense right now. That could be an interesting move, and it could be the way for the Saints to politely move on from Drew Brees and allow Drew Brees to retire after one more year next year. He is a free agent this year, by the way, Drew Brees. Just throwing that out there.
All three quarterbacks on the Saints. Saints are free agents.
Well, a lot of that is coming back to the collective bargaining agreement, and a lot of these guys aren't really sure what's going to be happening after this. So a lot of guys actually set their contracts up to expire on this year because there's a good chance that the salary will be higher next year and they'll be able to get a bigger contract out of said team. That's kind of going on around the league right now, and it's kind of something that a lot of people have been discussing about how good this free agency is, but we may well see scab football next year for the first time since, wasn't it the 90s or was it the 80s? I think it was the 90s.
I think it was the 90s, but I don't think that's going to happen. I think we'll reach an agreement.
Absolutely, but that's at the same time, that's why all these guys are free agents, is because they know they can get more money next year after the CBA is done. But right. Let's go ahead and get into Week 12 matchups. First one, let's talk about Dallas, New England. I'm just going to keep it short, keep it simple here. Dallas, good team. I got New England winning this.
All right, well, I got it completely opposite, in my opinion.
Really?
I think Cowboys have number one total offense in the league, and the Patriots might have a good defense, but they're exposed. I called the upset with Baltimore. I'm calling this one, too. Cowboys upset Patriots.
All right. The next one, Green Bay, San Francisco. And I think we're going to vary on this one, too, because I just said it. There's no spoiler. I think Green Bay wins this game. Green Bay has a great pass rush. They're going to be able to put pressure on Jimmy Garoppolo. If Matt Breida is not healthy, Tevin Coleman can't carry the workload by himself. He showed it last week, too. If Emmanuel Sanders isn't 100% healthy, that's Jimmy Garoppolo's favorite target right now. And if he can't find him, he's going to be kind of lost out there. Yeah, George Kittle will be available, but at the same time, he's really became kind of almost infatuated with the way that Emmanuel Sanders runs routes. So I have Green Bay winning this. I think that Aaron Rodgers shows up, does what primetime Aaron Rodgers does. I'm not saying that San Francisco is going to have a bad game either. Just to be clear, I think this is going to be a good game all around. I think Green Bay wins it.
San Francisco, I've been taking them all year. I think that this team has been incredible. I was on their hype train when a lot of people were doubting them when they're remaining undefeated, and I said these guys are for real. But I agree. I think the Packers are going to win this game. I think it all comes down to the running game on this side. I think you hit the nail on the head with having the injured Breida. Coleman really can't take off. And the Packers have had an incredible running game, especially with Aaron Jones at the helm. I think the Packers will be incredible. One interesting fact that I just found out when I was researching this game is Aaron Rodgers has never faced a team that has been 9-1 or better in his entire career. So this will be the first time he faces a team this good record-wise. But like you said, it's on primetime. The spread is only 3 points in favor of San Francisco. So I would take Green Bay with the points. I think Green Bay wins this one.
Okay. And then the next game I want to get into is Baltimore and the Rams. Pretty sure Baltimore just runs over the Rams here. That team has looked good at times, bad at times, great at times, horrible at times. So I don't know what we're getting out of LA. We know what we're getting out of Baltimore because they just dog stomped Houston last week. They beat New England before that. They're showing what they are. That defense is really good. Them adding Marcus Peters was like the best addition they could have made to that team. And man, do they look good out there. Jimmy Smith, Marcus Peters. I mean, it's looking really good right now, and I'm really impressed with that secondary. Kind of interested to see how they do going forward. I think they got to at least lose one more. And the only reason I think they should have to lose one more game is because if they go undefeated from here on out to the playoffs, they're going to lose in the playoffs. They got to have that one game that shows them what they were doing wrong. It seems like every year that's what happens is the winning team has that one game that showed them what they were doing wrong, and then they get it right for the playoff push. Anything you want to say about that one?
I think it all depends on what happens with the Rams wide receivers. They had injuries, and they dealt with injuries last week, although they still came out with the win. Robert Woods was out for personal reasons, so we'll see him back this week. And it all depends on how Goff plays. We know that Gurley's going to have to play in a must-win situation here. I think we'll see more carries from him. I don't think he'll be on a snap count or a carry count this week. I think we'll see a lot of good play out of Gurley. So if you have him, I'd start him this week because I think he's going to take a big portion of this game because Los Angeles is in a must-win moment right now. However, Lamar Jackson's 14-3 as a starter so far in his career. He's amazing. We've been talking how he's an X-Factor, MVP caliber, and I think that continues. I got Baltimore winning this game.
Absolutely. And then the last one I want to talk about real quick is Seattle-Philadelphia. I think Seattle wins it. Philadelphia doesn't look good. Carson Wentz, not the quarterback he was a few years ago before he got injured. I think this is a pretty simple, pretty easy game to call. Russell Wilson is MVP candidate right now for a reason. I got Seattle winning this game. They beat San Francisco for a reason too.
Yeah, I agree. Seattle is an amazing team. They're immaculate. I think that they will be a 5th seed, unfortunately, because San Francisco, if San Francisco loses, I think they'll have the tiebreaker, so they could go from 5-1 in the matter of a week, which would be incredible. But I got Seattle winning this game. Philadelphia, I think that they played well against New England last week, and they have a lot to play for, battling for that NFC East title, because if they don't win the division, they're not making the playoffs. No wild cards coming from the NFC East. But Russell Wilson has been amazing on the road this year. 5-0 on the road, 116 passing rating. His 116 is passing rating on the road. Incredible. I don't see that changing. I think Seattle wins. I think they're going to win big, too. I think it's going to be a large margin, and I think we're going to stop talking about the Philadelphia Eagles after this week.
Right, yeah, I think so, too, because Philadelphia just seems like one of those teams. They're so inconsistent. I don't know what we're seeing out there. Let's go ahead and get into award watches. MVP, the most obvious one. Lamar Jackson.
Yeah, absolutely. Lamar Jackson, Russell Wilson, those two for sure. Those are the guys that are still sitting on top for me, and it hasn't changed.
There's one guy I want to throw into the conversation. I know I said Deshaun Watson last week. Deshaun's still having a great year.
Yep.
There's one more guy, though, I want to throw out there, and first I'm going to try to get I'm going to go ahead and tell you who it is, and I'm going to tell you the numbers after, okay? The person is Kirk Cousins.
Ooh, interesting.
Now you're probably thinking to yourself, why would you have Kirk Cousins as your MVP candidate? I'm going to pull up the actual stats right now on my phone so I can make sure to get the exact ones.
I've heard people talk about that. I've heard people talk that Kirk Cousins should be in the MVP race. Look what he's done. But it's just, to me, yeah, he's had a fantastic season. But when you just look at the other quarterbacks that have played, like Wilson and Lamar Jackson, I don't think he even comes close. But I'm interested. I'm intrigued. What do you got?
All right. 2,700 yards passing.
Yep.
21 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, with a completion percentage of 70.6.
Yeah. See, that's amazing.
That's quiet consideration for MVP. Him and Aaron Rodgers are putting up very, very similar numbers right now. A lot of Packers fans are saying, oh, well, how could you ever want Kirk Cousins? Well, the numbers show it, that he's as good this year as most of the quarterbacks in the league. We discussed this before the season. I said if he doesn't get sacked, that guy is unstoppable. And he's showing it this year. He doesn't have the 12 interceptions this year. He has 3 because he's not getting sacked. But let's go ahead and get off the MVP talk. So I want to talk about Rookie of the Years. Obviously, I still think Offensive Rookie of the Year is Josh Jacobs. Anybody else you see that's really standing out, maybe?
No, Josh Jacobs is still my front runner, and I still have Murray sitting at second. Other than that, I really don't have much for that. I think that we didn't get that many offensive rookies that are really taking off this season. But Josh Jacobs has been incredible. I think he's going to have an off game this week, I will say, although they are playing the Jets. The Jets have an amazing run defense. I think that it's going to be up to the passing game for Oakland to win that football game, but I like Josh Jacobs.
All right. Defensively, I got 3 people now. I had Josh Allen.
Mm-hmm.
I had Nick Bosa. And a guy I've been watching all year. He's been good. He's getting a lot of pass rushes. And now he's the player of the week this week, and he deserved it because he had 4 sacks this week. I'm talking about Sax Crosby out there in Oakland. This guy looks like, I think he could get 10 sacks this year if he keeps up. Way they're looking right now, and he said it in the post-game interview. I was watching it. They said, last week we pinned our ears back. We started hitting at the quarterback. And it looks like we're just riding that train. Well, let me tell you, if they're just riding that train, Max Crosby's going to have 12 sacks by the end of this year because he is that good on the edge. He just pushes people's hands away. One of the biggest things is a defensive lineman. I've said when we were talking about Chase Young, I said that he doesn't use his hands much on the edge right now in college because he doesn't have to. Max Crosby is beating people's hands away like I've never seen. He's one of the best hand fighters I've seen in defensive lines for a rookie, mind you. He just knows what he's doing on the edge, and he just knows how to control the tackle. So it'd be interesting to see him going forward. I think next year he's going to have an even better year because he's going to be used to the game now. I know that sounds kind of, maybe that's just bold, maybe that's just the Raiders fan in me, but just watching the way he uses his hands off the edge, I like it. I like it a lot.
Yeah, it'd be pretty incredible to see 2 Raiders win Rookie of the Year, but it's highly possible. This guy's definitely stepped into the discussions for sure. Winning Defensive Rookie of the Week, or Defensive Player of the Week last week. Incredible. And we'll only see if it continues. He's playing against the Jets, which don't have that great of an offensive line, so maybe he can make some more stats and some more power towards it. I still like Bosa as the front runner, just because he's continued to shine and he's got that record right now. But Crosby's up there. I think he might be past Allen right now for number 2. And I still like Devin Bush, but he's moved down to 4 for me. But yeah, I think we've definitely had some more defensive rookies. They've been more impressive to me than the offensive rookies so far this season.
Yeah, defensive rookies is where it's at this year. It seems like the offensive rookies are still trying to get used to the game, other than Josh Jacobs and Murray. The only reason I don't really take Murray is because I've watched him play, and sometimes I'm like, oh man, he's a really good quarterback. Then other times I'm like, why are you doing circles in the pocket instead of just standing there for a second and keep looking downfield? You didn't even need to move. Nobody's even pressuring you. Quit moving around. He literally 5 times this year, I can count 5 times easily. I could pull clips up and post them to Tough Talk of where he just does circles in the pocket until he gets himself sacked.
Yep. He's definitely got room to grow. He's for sure has room to grow.
That's not pocket presence. That's pocket scaredness.
Yeah, no, you're right. But I mean, that's rookie mistakes, and that's why I think it's tough to win Rookie of the Year as a quarterback because you see those rookie mistakes. But Josh Jacobs is just having an incredible season. He's breaking Raiders franchise records. I don't think that anybody's going to touch him for Rookie of the Year. I think he wins unanimous.
Talking about other rookies I've seen too, real quick, and I'm going to compare it to Murray because I think it's a great comparison. Ryan Finley made his debut for the Bengals last week, or 2 weeks ago now, sorry. And his pocket presence, the way he was able to hold up the pocket, move around, manipulate the pocket, the way he was able to do that is how pro quarterbacks do it. Whereas Kyler Murray, he's just over there running around in circles, just wasting energy and getting his team holds. I don't like it. So I'm hoping that can change. If there's one thing I would change in his game would be his pocket presence. If I could give him Ryan Finley's pocket presence, he'd be Rookie of the Year this year, and his team would have way more wins. I'm just saying it like that right now. Let's get into the best bets for this week, and that's where we're going to be talking about spreads, talking about games that we think are surefire bets. The first one is the Raiders over the Jets. It's a 3-point spread. They're only giving us 3 points on the Jets. Derrick Carr is one of the top 10 quarterbacks in the NFL right now. If you want to argue it, go look at statistics. I think that's an easy lock. Seahawks is a 1-point spread. A 1-point spread. You take that game either way. Just take it. If you're an Eagles fan, take it for the Eagles, but I'm telling you Seahawks are winning, so I'd go that way. The other one that is a big one this week, it was a 3.5-point spread in for the San Francisco game. But they had San Francisco winning that game. Me and Christian have both agreed that the Green Bay Packers are most likely going to win this game. Oh, take that bet too. Those are the 3 surefire bets I got this week that I personally would probably be betting on.
It was 3.5. It actually moved down to 3. So I moved a little bit in favor of Green Bay, but I'd still take Green Bay with the points. Yeah, 3 point. That's the one that I really want to discuss. You took it from me, but that's fine. Yeah, it's that one right there. Green Bay with the points. San Francisco's been exposed the last few weeks, and I think that they get the 3 points just basically off being home, being a home team in this one. I think it's an even spread, so I take the away team in this one, Green Bay with points.
The Seattle one is the most even spread I've seen all year. That 1 point spread, I can't even believe that's a thing right now.
I'm guessing, in Philadelphia had a crazy spread against New England last week, and I told you that they were only going to lose by a possession, and they did, 17-10. But this is crazy. Only seeing a 1 point. I don't think Seattle deserves that. That's almost like a smack in the face for Seattle. So I definitely take Seattle in that game.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like I said, take Seattle. If you're a Phillies fan or if you're an Eagles fan and you're in Philly and you're like, well, we're winning this game, then take the spread because it's only 1 point. As long as you don't tie, you win. Is how I'm seeing this right now. As long as you ain't tying with them, you're winning. So whatever team you're backing, back them. But I think it's Seattle all the way. This will probably be my extra Christmas money bet for the week, actually. Any other teams you really got that are going to be like a surprise this week that may be shocking people on the...
No, not really. Maybe watch out for the Washington Redskins, if anything.
That was the other one I had a question mark about.
Playing the Detroit Lions, and they don't have Matt Stafford. The Lions have lost the last 6 or 7 games. So Washington might sneak out a win. We've seen improvements from Haskins. So possibly that one. That would be one that I would look at, but I wouldn't take it personally. But if you're looking for a risk, maybe a high risk reward game, that would be the game I would look at.
Absolutely. So let's go ahead and take that and move it right into our fantasy talk. Because the guy I got this week, I'm only going to be doing DraftKings this week, and me and Christian discussed it before the show. We're so late into the fantasy season, unless somebody gets hurt, it's hard to find waiver wire pickups. And as far as matchups go, I think you guys know the matchups by now. It's the worst defenses. You want to go against them. And at this point, most everybody's fantasy teams are locked up. You're not getting any more. Our trade deadline just passed, so unless you're picking up waiver wires, you're not picking up anything anymore. But the guy I got that's good for DraftKings right now, and he's cheap, is Jeff Driscoll. He's only $5,500 for the salary. I think he could have a big game against Washington. Another guy I got is Derrick Carr. He's $6,100, but we're going against the Jets secondary. It's one of the worst secondaries in the league. I think he's going to have a big game, probably 3 to 4 touchdowns. The other guy I got, this is an Oakland stack, is Hunter Renfrow. He's at $4,500. For some reason, he just seems to keep doing good, but I think he's about to have that breakout game. He hasn't had that breakout game yet, but I think he's about to have it. As far as tight ends go, I got 2 tight ends for you right now that are below average salary tight ends. One of them has been consistent all year in Greg Olsen. He's just kind of been a consistent teen back or a teen fantasy guy. He's going to get you in the teens every week, and he's only $4,100. The other guy who's been having a good up and up recently is Noah Fant for the Denver Broncos. It looks like that new quarterback actually really likes finding Fant, and he's only $3,900 right now. So these are the guys that you can go for the low side to get you somebody better on the other ends. One other thing I want to talk about is the Falcons defense. It's only $3,500 right now. And as I stated earlier in the show, and I'll state it again, 55-12 in their last 2 games. There's something going on with that Falcons defense. They're still playing. That's the defense I would take if you're trying to get a cheap one. What do you got for us, Christian?
I like the Browns defense this week against Miami. And I also like the Nick Chubb for Miami too. I think that those guys, when you look at that game right there, I think those 2 would be good. I think that would be a low bet. Chubb will probably cost you a little bit, but you could stack him with Kareem Hunt if you want to do a stack on running back for the same team, because I think those both guys are going to go off for the Cleveland Browns. I'm also really huge on almost any receiver for the Atlanta Falcons this week against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I think the Falcons are going to continue to shine. They're going to move 4-7, beat the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and you could stack him with Matt Ryan with some of the lower end receivers. For the Atlanta Falcons, you don't have to go for Julio Jones in this one. I think Calvin Ridley would be great, and I think that you could even go even lower. I mean, like their 3rd or 4th receivers. And a tight end, in my opinion, I like Vance McDonald for the Pittsburgh Steelers against the Cincinnati Bengals. I think Vance McDonald's a low bet and a good value pick moving forward. I think that's really where I sit. I think that's a really great pick. And if you want to pay for a high-end player this week, I'd go for Lamar Jackson against the Rams. And now that might be a showdown pick, so you might have to move on from that because it's Monday night. It won't be a Sunday game. So if you had to pick another high bet quarterback, I know it might sound crazy, but not a lot of people might not take it because who they're playing. But go for Dak Prescott. He's been amazing. He has the most yards for a quarterback, and although he's playing New England's defense, I wouldn't be surprised if he puts some numbers up and exposes that defense. I think Dallas is going to play a great game, and I wouldn't be scared to put Dak Prescott in the lineup.
Absolutely. All right. Anything else you want to say before we go ahead and cut off this week's episode of Tough Talk?
No, that's it. Good to see you, and looking for you next week. I'm definitely gonna bring some heat for that Trubisky argument next week. I'm ready for it.
I definitely want to hear your argument for Trubisky. We'll probably talk about that before we even start the show off next week. We'll probably be discussing that because that may take us 10-15 minutes to talk about that just by itself. But yep. All right, guys, I think that's going to be it for this week's episode. So we'll see you guys next week.
Take care.
Thanks for listening to the Tough Talk Podcast. Be sure to tune in every Friday as we break down all the major sports topics for the week. Don't forget to subscribe and follow on Twitter at Tough Talk Pod.